Allah dies. Does Allah die?
Oh, well, so I'm not sure if they're
I
asking if
think
they're
this is
using.
Christian is asking. I heard you said before Allah
Oh,
dies.
okay.
Can you explain that? But I think they meant to ask to you.
Yeah. So I think I know what they might be asking. So one of the things that I have observed, spent a lot of time on, and I have a lot more that I plan to put out on this topic in the future. But contrary to some popular opinion, ignorant, ill-informed opinion, the God of Islam is not the same in his attributes as the God of the Bible, right? And I'm not just talking here about what we've already said, that he's not holy like the God of the Bible, righteous like the God of the Bible, truly and absolutely loving like the God of the Bible. And I'm not saying he doesn't claim some of those things. I'm just saying that if we really look at what's said in the Quran about Allah, he ends up not being those things. But it's what I'm really thinking about here is that the Quran actually describes Allah as if he were an anthropomorphic being, right? A being who actually has an anatomy, right? Hands, face, eyes, shin, feet, and so forth. So now the Old Testament tells us that God is spirit and he's infinite. He fills heaven and earth. He transcends all created reality and temporal limitations and all of that. But because he's almighty, he has the power to reveal himself in a visible form. But that doesn't mean he's limited to that visible form. But that's not what the Islamic sources teach. The Islamic sources do not teach that Allah becomes incarnate or anything like that, or appears in theophanies. So when we look in the Quran and in the Hadith and see them ascribing to Allah human features, they can't explain this away as incarnation or theophany or anything like that. It has to be talking about who Allah is in his essential nature. Okay, so now here's the point of this. Now somebody might be saying, I'm just making all this up. Well, let me give you an example. In Surah 38:75, Satan is upbraided by Allah. Allah chastises Satan because he didn't bow down to Adam. Okay. Now, why was Satan supposed to bow down to Adam? Well, according to Surah 38:75, he should have bowed down to Adam because Allah created Adam with his own two hands. It's very explicit in the Arabic. My own two hands. Now, the reason this is significant is because elsewhere the Quran speaks of Allah creating simply by his word be. But when it comes to Adam, it says he created him with his own two hands. When you look at various hadith, it says that Allah only created four things with his own hands. It says he created Adam with his own hands. He planted the Garden of Eden with his own hands. He created the pen with his own hands, and he wrote the Torah for Moses with his own hands. Okay, so what the Quran is saying is because Adam was directly created by Allah with his own hands, therefore Satan should have bowed down to him as something special. And this tells us that Allah has hands. Otherwise, the verse makes no sense. This is further drawn out in other hadiths, like the hadith in Tirmidhi, where it says that Allah placed his palm between Muhammad's shoulder blades, and Muhammad felt its coolness on his back. It talks about Allah showing his shin on the day of resurrection. Over and over again, the Islamic sources say Allah has these features. Okay, now this is getting to the point. The Quran also says Allah has a soul, right? Right now, many people miss this. Many people miss this because they're focused on something else. But what does Surah 5, 116 say? Let me pull out my Quran here. Actually, you can read it if you've got it. Oh, this isn't the Quran. This is Ahmed the Musnad of Ahmed bin Hanbal. But
I've got here. Shall I read it?
yeah, what does 5:116 say?
And when Allah will say, O Jesus, son of Mary, did you say to the people, take me and my mother as deities beside Allah. He will say, Exalted are you. It was not for me to say that which I have no right. If I had said, you would have known it. You know what is within my soul, and I do not know what is in yourself. Indeed, it is you who is the knower of the unseen.
Okay, so now let me make an observation here. The translation you read is actually doing the great Islamic cover-up that I talked about last time I was on the show. I didn't call it that, but Muslim translators are notorious for inaccurately translating things into English. Um, when you read that one part of the verse where Isa is supposedly saying, "You know what's in my soul," but then your translation goes on to say, "But I don't know what's in yourself."
Yeah,
The Arabic term in both cases is the word for soul. What
nefes.
Isa literally says is, "You know what's in my soul, but I don't know what's in your soul." So according to the Quran, just like Allah has hands, face, feet, shin, and all of that, and the Hadith, Allah also has a soul. Okay. Now, why is this relevant? Well, because according to the Quran, and here I'm just in this case, I'm just basically turning Islamic logic back on Muslims, because they aren't willing to realize that Jesus was able to die because he took a human nature. I'm simply pointing out, well, since the Quran really teaches that Allah has a soul, what are you going to do then when the Quran says every soul shall taste death? Right? Doesn't the Quran say that? Oops.
Yeah,
Um, I am, hold on, I'm just pulling up those verses real quick.
Surah
Uh,
3.
yeah, in Surah 3, 185,
Yeah,
it says, every soul shall have a taste of death. 21:35 says, every soul shall have a taste of death. Surah 29:57, every soul shall have a taste of death. So it's simply a logical syllogism. If every soul shall taste death, if Allah has a soul, then Allah shall taste death. Now, what I think this person is probably thinking is, oh, there's a problem though, because in these verses, notice what it goes on to say. For example, it says, let me just read 29:57. Every soul shall have a taste of death. In the end, to us shall you be brought back. So it's saying, Allah's saying you'll be brought back to us. So obviously Allah won't die. But that doesn't prove Allah won't die, because it's saying every soul is going to taste death and will be brought back to Allah. So if every soul can still be brought back to Allah even after tasting death, then perhaps Allah will be resurrected too, or something along those lines. Or we have the other problem here, that notice, remember, according to Islamic logic, um, the Quran is the direct speech of Allah. It's always Allah speaking in the Quran, right? Um, it's always Allah who is speaking in the Quran. I was trying to find another verse, but sometimes the Quran switches between Allah speaking in the first person and Allah speaking in the third person. So I could just as easily take these statements and say, when Allah says every soul shall taste death and then talks about all souls returning to Allah, perhaps that's one Allah talking about another Allah, so that when all souls taste death, the soul of Allah then, this Allah will return to the other Allah. Okay, I mean, I'm not. Again, you just have to remember, what I'm doing here is employing Muslim logic, right? I'm just saying, since your own Quran teaches that Allah has a soul, and you like to play games with the Bible when it talks about, um, for example, the Bible will say things like uh, God repents, right? We know that just means that when somebody repents, then God does not execute his judgment on them. That's all that's talking about. But the Quran also uses that same kind of language. So when we point it out to Muslims, all we're doing is we're saying, if you're playing this game, then so are we, right? So that's all I was saying before. By the way, I could say the same thing when it comes to the face of Allah. The Quran says Allah has a face, but according to the Quran, every face shall perish, right? Or every, how does it put it in Surah? I'm trying to find the.
I think I did have a reference for that one.
Or it says that, or excuse me, I said every face will perish. I'm thinking of soul, but it what it says is everything will perish except for Allah's face, right? So if we take that literally, if Allah has a face, hands, feet, shin, then everything's going to perish except for his face. So he's going to look like the Cheshire Cat, right? You know the from Alice in Wonderland, how the cat, everything disappears except for its face and smile. So that's all I was talking about. If that's what they're referring to, I don't know if that's what they're referring to.
Yeah, I think that's that. So a quick comeback was that on the soul of Allah. Nefes has many meanings in Arabic. Arabic words has many meanings. So that's the kind of quick comeback. But I don't think that works though.
No, it doesn't work for two reasons. Number one, what Isa is supposedly saying here is, he said, notice what he says. If I had been saying it, then surely thou wouldst have known it. You know what is in my soul. He's saying that Allah knows his innermost thoughts, right? You know what's in my soul, but I don't know what's in your soul, your innermost being. So obviously it refers to the soul of Isa, and since it's the same word used in the same context, trying to give it two different meanings doesn't work. It also is problematic because more competent Islamic authorities take this as meaning soul. Think, for example, here's a quotation from Al-Qadi Abu Yala. He says, he was a Hanbali scholar, by the way. He says, it said, this is kind of confusing for people to hear me reading because it's got all these other terms in there, but try and follow along. It says, it is said, and he's quoting someone, he is a corporeal person, shakhs, or form, surah. It should be said, the report from different routes on the night the Miraj happened, the journey to Jerusalem and ascent into heaven, I saw my Lord in the most beautiful form. And the application of that is not to be refused. Just as soul, nafs, not like souls, and essence, not like essences, were not denied him. In other words, he's saying that Allah has a soul, but it's unlike other souls, and he has essence, but not like other essences. But he's saying we're not to deny that. That's what the Quran says. We can't deny that Allah has a soul. But we can play games and say, oh, but it's unlike every other soul. Okay, so Allah has a hand. It's just not like other hands. Just like the hand of an elephant is not like the hand of a monkey or the hand of a man. They're still hands, right? And so Allah still has a soul, however you want to cut it.
Allah doesn't have a soul because there is nothing like into him.
Okay, so it amazes me how little people think through things. Muslims mutter this like a mantra without ever really thinking about it. Surah 42:11 says there's nothing like him. Surah 112:4 says basically the same thing, right? By the way, those the numbers are reversible there, right? It's easy to remember. 42:11 is 112:4 backwards. So those two verses say there's nothing like Allah. So does that mean that Allah doesn't have a body, Allah doesn't have hands, Allah doesn't have a face, even though Allah says he has all those things? Well, let me ask you a question. Muhammad said that his wives are not like the unbelieving women, right? Doesn't Muhammad say that? They're not like the unbelieving women? Well, wait a minute. Does that mean Muhammad's wives don't have bodies? Does that mean Muhammad's wives don't have hands and feet and all that sort of thing? They're not like the unbelieving women. Well, I mean, this is so they're basically deciding that it says there's nothing like him, and we can just decide whatever we want that word to mean, nothing like him. But every single Islamic sect in Islamic history has used that verse to argue their own position, right? That's why. So you have, for example, the Mu'tazili said Allah has no attributes because if he has attributes, then he's like creatures that have attributes. So they said Allah has no attributes, meaning he doesn't have the attribute of omniscience, the attribute of all powerfulness, the attribute of life, the attribute of holiness, the attribute of goodness. He has none of those attributes. Otherwise, he's like creatures. Is that what it means? Well, no. The Ash'ari theologians said he does have those things, right? But then they wanted to say, oh, but he doesn't have literal hands and feet. He has all knowledge, he's all knowing, he's all hearing, but he doesn't have hands and feet. But then the Hanbalis come along and the Salafis, the Atharis, and they say, oh, he does have those things because the Quran says he has those things, just like it says he's all hearing and all seeing. But his hands and feet are not like those of others. I mean, on and on it goes. Those verses do not help Muslims. They're just as ambiguous as the rest of the Quran. So it's not helpful.
We did question Dava Gangs at Speakers Corner regarding physical parts of Allah. And for example, when we were questioning on the shin of Allah, quick comeback was his shin is not like our shin. So we have, I think I was using Daniel or someone, they said like your shin is like hairy and short, but shin of Allah is different. And same when Allah touches his hand and then cool, his fingers becomes cool on Muhammad feels that. It's not like our fingers. So like that is very common response. But yeah. Sad.
So let me share something here. I'm just trying to pull it up. Oh wait. I'm trying to remember how I did this. This was many, many years ago. I had written a blog article on answering Muslims for David, and it was in response to a Muslim named Paul Williams. You know Paul Williams probably, right?
I am not sure if he's Muslim. He has no knowledge of Islam, but he claims to be Muslim and attacks Christian faith. Yeah, that one. Yes, sadly, I do know him.
Yeah, so I had numerous interactions with him in the past, but
I feel for you.
Yeah, so he used to do stuff on his blog, and then he kind of dropped out of the scene. But I want you to notice what it says in this hadith. There are several hadith that make reference to Allah's shin. Okay, the Quran makes reference to the shin.
Yeah.
But this hadith is utterly devastating. This particular one. Okay. It's a long hadith. I'm going to read certain parts of it, but listen to the first part. It says, narrated Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, during the lifetime of the Prophet, some people said, "O Allah's apostle, shall we see our Lord on the day of resurrection?"
Yeah.
So this is the question that they're answering. Yeah. Shall we see him? Okay. They're asking about it with their physical eyes, because notice what it says. It goes on. The Prophet said, "Yes. Do you have any difficulty in seeing the sun at midday when it's bright and there's no cloud in the sky?" They replied, "No." He said, "Do you have any difficulty in seeing the moon on a full moon night when it's bright and there's no cloud in the sky?" They replied, "No." The Prophet said, "You will have no difficulty in seeing Allah on the day of resurrection." Now the idea is, here you've got all of mankind and even all the animals, everything, right, that's ever lived, gathered on the day of resurrection, the day of Yom al-Qiyamah. And so the idea is there's this huge throng of people. Are we going to be able to see Allah is what they're asking. And so Muhammad's saying, do you have any trouble seeing the sun up in the sky? Any trouble seeing the moon? And he's saying, you'll see Allah, just like that, right? So that's the question. That's the issue in this hadith. Now, Now notice this. Here's where it gets really, really good. And most people don't even notice these specific points of this hadith that I want to focus on. It talks in the hadith about Allah assuming shape-shifting, if you will,
Yeah.
into different forms and appearing to people, right? And so Muslims don't recognize him when he comes to them, and they refuse to worship him. They say, we're waiting for our Lord. But then it tells us that Allah's going to come in his true form, and then finally they'll recognize him. Now ask yourself this question. How come they don't recognize him in these other forms, but they're now going to recognize him on the day of resurrection? It seems to suggest that they should already know what Allah looks like, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How else are they going to say this isn't the right one, this one is, right? Well, listen to how the hadith goes on. They will say what the form it says then when there remain in the gathering none but those who used to worship Allah, whether they were obedient or disobedient, then Allah, the Lord of the worlds, will come to them in the form nearest to the picture they had in their minds about him. And then it talks about him revealing his shin. So notice this. All Muslims are expected to have a mental picture of Allah. What do you call a picture of God? It's called an idol, right? It's an idol of the mind, at least, right? If they were to, are you allowed to have pictures of Allah? No, I mean, you're not allowed to have pictures of Allah. You can't even have pictures of Muhammad. But here, Muhammad in the hadith is saying that all Muslims are to have a mental picture of Allah in their mind. Where would they get such a picture? Muhammad gives them the description of Allah all throughout the Quran and the hadith. He talks about Allah's hands, he talks about Allah's fingers, his fingertips, he talks about Allah's face, he talks about Allah's ear and eyes, he talks about his shin, he talks about his feet. Over and over again, Muhammad describes Allah and therefore expects people to have a mental picture of him in their heads. Okay? As Christians, we call that idolatry. Or, at least turn back upon Muslims their own logic because they say you can't have any pictures. They have a picture of their own deity in their head, according to Muhammad. And if they don't have that picture in their head, they're not Muslims, they're not going to recognize Allah on that day and are going to go to hell.
I think that hadith is like very sad one because it's not only Allah deceived Christians when it comes to death of Jesus. It's not only Allah deceived Muhammad, but even on the day of judgment, it's like last day, Allah is deceiving Muslims by coming in the different form and different shapes. I think it's like so sad. Yeah, that's the hadith we were using, and then that's the hadith they said actually it's not like our shin, it's like different than
Yeah. Well, see, so even if they say it's not like ours, I mean, what does not like mean? If I say, I can say literally, I mean, I can say truly, my shin is not like your shin, right? My shin is not like your shin. Now, that doesn't mean it's not a shin. It doesn't mean it's not even, it doesn't even mean it's not a human shin. It doesn't even mean that, it doesn't have skin, hair on it, a bone and so forth. What does it mean not like? That doesn't really tell us anything. You have to know, you have to have some further clarification. Clearly, it's recognizable as a shin,
yeah.
right? Because it's called a shin, and they're going to recognize it as such. So that just doesn't work. I mean, the shin of a giraffe is not like our shin, but it's still a shin, and
Yeah, we were making fun of it, like is it shaved or is it not shaved? But
yeah.
I don't know if this is the one you read it. People are asking for the reference. Sahih Bukhari 993 532. Is that the one you read it, brother?
So that's one. I'll put my article in the chat box, but
Yes.
the hadith I was reading was volume 6, book 60, number 105.
Okay.
This is the only one that I know of that actually talks about having a mental picture in their heads. So that's why I say, when you look at the hadith, it's often interesting to see some additional details that's given by a particular narrator. And this one often gets lost in the shuffle because people are looking at, just the fact that it says Allah has a shin,
Yeah.
but this additional detail that people are to have a mental image, to me, it says a lot. It tells you that we're talking about. This is idolatry from an Islamic perspective. You can't have pictures of Allah, Muhammad, or whatever, and yet Allah himself or Muhammad in the Hadith say you're supposed to have a picture of Allah in your head.